C'est en récitant que je vais vous conter. Une jeune déségarée trouvera une bande d'amis guerriers. Une douce mélodie à travers tout le pays qui pense vanille sous les feux d'artifice. La promesse de nuit pense, la chanson cesse
figé dans l'éternité.
et si la musique pouvait encore s'envoler, là-haut nous pouvons tous chanter. Nos âmes seront unies à jamais. Laissons nos souffrances dans les bassins. Chansons idiotes. Laissons le monde nous emporter vers l'avant. Nous va porter parfait tout vent de la musique. Nos âmes seront unies à jamais. Nos âmes seront unies à jamais.
Hello and welcome to another one of my Infinity Nikki season reviews. So this one, I have a lot to say. This kind of surprised me because this was a pretty anticipated season for me because of the housing system. And then from what I saw of the story, it looked pretty interesting. So this one kind of took me by surprise. And I'm actually pretty disappointed with this update. Not the intent behind the update, but what we actually ended up getting. So let me get into why that is. Of course, as always, we're going to have three parts, the strengths of the narrative, the weaknesses of the narrative, and then update as a whole. And that's kind of where I'm going to talk about the housing system itself. Narrative stuff is going to be at the beginning half of the video. We always start with strengths, or I'm choosing to because I have a lot to discuss in the weaknesses section. So let's start positively, okay? So the way I'm going to organize this is in each of the narrative sections, I'm going to go over the opera, what I'm going to call the opera plot, which is music, seasons, narrative. Then I'm going to go over the housing plot. So strengths of the opera plot. I appreciated that they tried to write an emotional, character-driven story experience that fleshes out more NPCs that we know from Flourish. So Vino has been at the Chuckle Club, and we haven't really had much in the Chuckle Club, so it was kind of nice to flesh out this like really well-designed, very cool location in Flourish. I remember when I first discovered it, I was like, whoa, look at this place, it's so beautiful. But it never really got much of a place in this story, aside from us going there in the original story content, so we could go fight the Sovereign of Cool, which was Nikki's first Sovereign battle, which was very fun. Aside from that, the Chuckle Club doesn't have any real history that we know of. So it was very cool to flesh out this location and the owner behind it and why he opened up the Chuckle Club and what the soul is behind this club, right? I really did appreciate this. Unfortunately, this is a situation of a good concept, but lazy writing. And I'm going to get into why it's lazy. Okay, and lazy doesn't necessarily mean no one connected with it. I think there is some emotion put into this, but it's bottlenecked by the writing, and it didn't have to be. That's what's so frustrating. It's not like that there was just complete incompetency. It was all the makings of this was all there. It was all present in what we got, and I just don't understand why it ended up the way it did. But I'll get into that in the weaknesses. But I liked the concept. I did. The dress is beautiful. The location's beautiful. The sets were great. The whole opera house in the suitcase was a very fun, whimsical idea. Loved that. I loved the spooky kind of theme of the opera dungeon where we had the mannequins. Like that was, I was actually like jumping as they kind of like spun and sung and danced towards you. Like, that was all fun. I actually loved all of that, okay? I also really liked the kind of murder mystery, kind of Phantom of the Opera vibes we got too at the beginning of the quest. That initial start to the quest was pretty strong. I liked the atmosphere. I liked how we were kind of trying to investigate, and there was like the puppet reveal was fun because we know that we slowly realized that these NPCs died. Like, it was there, like I said, there was something there that was good. It just really falters off, and I'll get into why in the weaknesses. So, housing plot narrative. I love any and all new opportunities to get new lore in Infinity Nikki. Now, whether this new lore is always presented well, is a different story. I wasn't as upset with the very little narrative we got for the housing update, or the housing part of the update, because the opera plot had way more to dissect and way more of a story. The housing plot doesn't really have any, it's not really a story. It's just kind of like an introduction to the housing system, which I guess is fine. I don't have a criticism on its length necessarily. I'll get into what problems I have with it later, but I do like that we got introduced to a new character, right? Very handsome new character. We love that. But despite us getting a little bit of information about him and his relationship with the seer, I think there is way more that they could have done to elevate his introduction to the story. Everything I want to say is kind of a criticism, but I did like that we got new information on the seer, right? And through context, right? And how she has a relationship with someone outside of Nikki, and that she works together with him. And we don't know the extent of their dynamic, but it's very fun to kind of think about that and what is their dynamic, especially since he said the Momo clan. That was really cool. So there's a Momo clan. Maybe Momo is some sort of descendant of his kind of established role, if we kind of see the seer as like this divine celestial version of Nikki's, right? Some future version of her existence, right? We can see him as the seer's Momo, which is an interesting dynamic to consider. I did enjoy brainstorming this and getting introduced to new dynamics with a character who is tied to a lot of story inconsistencies with the retcon. So it was nice that they were trying to bring this character back in through the introduction of this new man, who is not only handsome, but it was interesting to kind of hear what he had to say. Again, I have some criticisms of this, but I liked that we were getting more main story NPCs that we will hopefully see again. I don't know how soon, but I have to assume his connection with the seer will guarantee his presence at some point later in the story. And this is not just because he's a guy. If it doesn't matter what gender this character was, I'm happy that we're getting more main story characters introduced to us. I still want to revisit the ones that we've left in the dust, not just Giovanni, but Tanyoyo, like all of them. I would love to revisit at some point, but I appreciate that they're trying to bring in relevant NPCs that we will see later in the story. I have literally nothing to say about the Stardew Valley collab in the strength section. So I really don't like being negative. Like I don't play Stardew Valley, okay? Like I know what it is, obviously, and I know it's very popular, okay? And it's a beloved title. I understand that. And I'm not trying to make fun of the collab with Infinity Nikki, because I think it actually, the two IPs have a lot in common. So I think the collab could have really worked, especially during a housing update where they introduce like kind of like farming mechanics, fishing mechanics, building a home, like a little homestead. Like it's on paper, it's like a perfect moment to collaborate with this other game, this other company. So I'm not shitting on that. Okay, I want to make that very clear. But from what we did get, as someone who hasn't played Stardew Valley but knows, general stuff about it, the collab itself is very underwhelming. And I want to talk about why that was. I don't like being overly negative. I like my negativity or things that aren't positive. I want to make sure that they're backed by like actual criticism and not just me whining or complaining or being an emotional bitch about stuff. Okay, so I promise you all of this is rooted in actual criticism that's objective, okay, and analytical, and not just me being annoying. Okay, I promise. So with that, let's go ahead and start in on the weaknesses section. I'm gonna get really deep in here. Okay, so we're gonna start with the opera plot. All right, like I said in the strength section, it starts out pretty strong, okay, but it really falls apart by the end for me. The Phantom of the Opera murder mystery vibes was great, a good choice. Fits the atmosphere of this quest very well. Loved this direction. Plays into a lot of tropes present in like media surrounding like the mystique of theaters and like what really goes on behind the curtains. Great. The reveal of the puppets, great. Stage in the box, great. Creepy puppet dungeon, perfect. Whimsical, unique, super spooky. The first crack for me, okay, is once we start investigating and we read about each of these essentially dead NPCs, we come to understand these people are dead, right? These people aren't alive anymore. And we discover that they are puppets and that there's something really wrong here. There's something very unnatural happening. And this was, again, it fine, but the first crack, they never really truly humanize any one of the NPCs, the dead puppet NPCs, aside from Vino's sister. And I understand that they don't, it's hard to try and give attention to, what was it, like 1, 2, 3, 4, like 5 new NPCs. Like it's hard to ask a player to emotionally invest in all these NPCs that they've just met. Okay, I understand giving emphasis is important, and Vino is part of Nikki's investigation because of his sister. I like the weight of their relationship as brother and sister, so I don't dislike the emphasis on his sister, but we don't get very much about the other NPCs or even Ennio himself, aside from his own kind of villain monologue towards the end of Act 2, which I'm going to talk about in a second. But if you read a lot of the little journals and stuff during the investigation in the opera house in the box, or excuse me, in the suitcase, you do get a little bit, like it describes their personalities like very surface level. But other than that, we don't get much. Okay, so a first crack, not too bad. It's something like, again, if this story wrapped up well, I would let this go. Okay, but because there is a disaster in the works here, this is the first sign of real trouble, okay? This is important because when they all perform with Nikki, in the performance at the end, there's little emotional payoff seeing these characters get to sing again. And actually, I have so much to say on this, but I'm trying to keep my thoughts organized with the flow of my critique. So I'm going to talk about I'm going to put another pin in that whole performance. Okay, we'll get there. But there is little emotional payoff when they do kind of get this final performance with Nikki on stage, because we don't really know much about them aside from Vino's sister, who's given the emotional kind of emphasis. If this was better written towards the end, I wouldn't be so harsh on these points, but it does, so I am. Let's talk about where things really fell apart. So this happens at the climax, at the end of what I deem to be kind of like Act 2 of the plot, before Act 3, where, we have the final resolution and all that. Act 2 is when shit hits the fan. Within the writing and narratively, right? Everything kind of comes together here. Nikki and her friends, Vino, along with an NPC I haven't mentioned yet, but this NPC is a reporter and she's trying to get the scoop. She's sensed that something was wrong with Ennio and his performers, because they're all part of this troupe, and she's been kind of like following them a little bit for a while, and she's like suspicious of him. So she joins Nikki in this investigation, or she was on an investigation herself and invites Nikki to join her. And then also Vino is involved because his sister, who has died, he saw in the flesh, right, in this performance troupe. So he's like, what the fuck? Because his sister died years ago in a fire. Nikki and friends finally confront Mr. Ennio, which is the director of this troupe, who was a former member of the troop. We find out through investigation, and they all come forward because they're like, why how is this, how are you puppeteering our dead relatives and these people who are no longer with us? How are you getting them to perform? Like, what's going on? Obviously there's something wrong here. This concept of animating the dead is really fun to introduce in Mirrorland. It's another exploration of what Women See's capable of, and this is good. I like this, okay? The moral grayness of this man who is suffering because he accidentally caused a fire that caused the deaths of all of his friends who he considered family, right? This troop was very close with each other. The guilt of this has driven him to madness, and he essentially given this special suitcase that, you know, also is taught this like dark women see that allows him to puppeteer these mannequins, these puppets that look like his dead friends, and force them to perform over and over and over and over and over again. There's something very twisted but bittersweet about this, because Ennio's not doing this out of malice. He's doing this out of this like debilitating sense of profound loss and guilt. Like I said, good concept, but that is all ruined as the plot continues to apologize for Ennio's character. It doesn't let the character or the story present more complex themes of morality, especially because Nikki's whim at the end, right, in the ending cutscene, she gets them to perform with her, and I assume it's her whim, right, that is animating them this time. I mean, that's at least visually how it's presented to us. It doesn't really explain, because they're dead and they're puppets. They're not real people. So something has to have motivated these beings, right, these possessed puppets, to perform once again. And it's presented as a good thing when Nikki does it. But when Ennio does it, it's a corrupt thing. And this is what I don't like, this forced black and white. Even though they establish that Ennio's character has done a bad thing, which is an understatement, animating the dead and essentially disgracing the memory of your dead friends in a desperate attempt to escape your own suffering. It's very selfish, right? Obviously, animating these puppets isn't hurting his dead friends. They're dead, but it's the memory of them that he is disgracing, right? It is selfish of him to puppeteer the corpses of their souls, to have them perform art that is supposed to be expression of the self, right? Art is supposed to be emotion and sharing experiences with others, trying to express how you feel about something or what you want to say, and having others take that into their hearts, right? That's the whole like point of art. And so the moral sickness of having these puppets perform and they're dead, right? That they're the dead souls of his friends is like, it's such a beautifully twisted thing, right? It's really, again, great concept. Love it. But Nikki and the other NPCs, including Vino, who was at first very pissed, rightfully so, at Ennio for being like, how dare you puppeteer my sister's image like this? How dare you call this her singing? Her singing wasn't like this. Her singing was made of passion and love, right? She's dead now. How dare you do this, right? How dare you have her, a hollow shell of her up there, right? So rightfully so, they're all mad at him. And he then attacks them. And it's clear that he's being possessed by the dark. He's so off the deep end emotionally and mentally unstable because he's old as well. And that's because the women see he's used ages him. This is another plot hole that comes up later, by the way. So this women see to animate the puppets ages him faster than he would normally. And you can see during the boss fight that he's clearly being possessed by the dark energy, the dark women see that he's been using all this time to puppet these performers, right, of his dead friends. So you understand as an audience member, he's not truly an evil man, right? This is a man who's been driven to this by grief, right? We understand that. So the heavy-handed way the plot, and Nikki is the mouthpiece for the plot, in dialogue saying, well, he didn't mean it that way, and blah, blah, not that verbatim, but all of them make excuses for Enio, even after he tries to attack them, even though he has been putting innocent people at risk because the dark energy that is used, the dark whimsy that is used to puppet these NPC, or excuse me, these, they are NPCs, but his friends, right, his dead friends, that energy is harmful to regular people. It's dark whimsy, and it's out of control, right? He doesn't control it, it controls him. That's shown very clearly in the boss fight. It's crazy that they don't let this be this like morally gray thing, that even good people can be driven to extreme acts of harm, even if it's inadvertent, right? He didn't mean to harm anyone. He was just so stricken in his grief that he clung to any way to see his friends again, to hear them sing again, right? Because he feels so guilty for accidentally being the cause of their deaths. So the plot doesn't let us understand that, right? As adults or as people with understanding of how stories work. They try to force the players and the characters overly justify Enio's behavior and actions. After the boss fight, right, they're like, oh, this is so sad. And Vito also turns on a coin, like flips right away. He's like, oh, this is so sad, poor guy. And Enio's like, I need to be alone, because Nikki and friends are trying to be like, don't do this. It's bad to do this, even though he already knew that, right? They discovered what he was doing, but Enio knew all along what was happening. He knew why he's aged faster. Like, he knows what he's doing. He knew that he was puppeteering his dead friends. So Nikki and co were the ones discovering the truth of what happened in this climax. Enio already knew. So them saying, hey, Enio, this is bad, is stupid, because he knows that, right? He's just so far deep in his suffering and his pain that he is blinding himself, purposefully being ignorant to this, because he's so desperate to feel his friends' presence again, to hear them sing again, because he's so sad. Like, we understand that. So Nikki and co trying to convince him, this is bad, don't do this, is silly, because he already knows that. What is you saying it out loud gonna do, right? They're not giving him anything to convince him otherwise. They're just telling him, oh, this is bad. It's like, he knows that, he's aware. And clearly a man who is this far gone, not just emotionally, but is able to be possessed and controlled by the dark whimsy he's wielding, to the extent of trying to murder innocents, right? Murder Vino, murder Nikki, murder the reporter character, right? All of these things happen during the boss fight. He attacks them, I assume with the intent to kill, because the dark, you see during the boss fight, the little dark whimsy energy is like hovering over his shoulders, and he's like moaning, and Enio's moaning and groaning and holding his head in his hands. Like, he's clearly not in control. So that means he's unstable and dangerous. But what does Nikki and co do? When Enio says, I'd like to be left alone now, Nikki's like, absolutely. Sure, King. I'm gonna head out. Let's all give Enio some space. What? This man just attacked all of you. You established in the dialogue 2 seconds ago that one, he's dangerous, not because he's an evil person, but because the whimsy that he has been using for all this time is in a state of such power, because it's fed off of his misery in this theater for so long, right? That it's grown this powerful that he's unable to control it, right? It controls him. It puppets him. That's the point. So one, we established he's not in control emotionally and of his own, of this whimsy. Two, hello, he's danger to anybody who gets into this theater, out of the theater. This is leaking out of the theater, because the very first cutscene of the whole plot, the whole narrative, is the puppets escaping the suitcase. So clearly this was an accident, right? The puppets are never supposed to leave the suitcase. So Enio has lost control of the magic that he uses. So why on earth would Nikki logically, right? Logically, why would she ever allow him to be by himself again? I'm not saying that he's evil and she should be keeping him under lock and key because he's bad, a bad person. She needs to be watching him because he can't control himself. But the narrative just like tries to get you to like not remember that. They're just like Nikki and Co. just like, oh my gosh, they leave the suitcase and talk for like 5 minutes about how sad and oh, he's not bad, he's not evil, blah, blah, blah. It's like, we know that. Like, we know that, but that doesn't change the fact that the story established he's very dangerous and not in control of himself. Like, if maybe this would be more believable that they left him alone, if Enio somehow gained control of himself and stopped the fight, right? But Nikki just beats him during the boss fight, right? She like purifies him back to normal for the time being. And she doesn't get rid of the Dark Womency, but he's back to normal. At least I assume. So why are we leaving him alone? Unless they want us to assume Nikki completely purified all Dark Womency, which also wouldn't make sense because she performs with the puppets later. So confusing. And another thing too, to add on to what I'm saying, is that no way would one conversation, right, after the boss fight and the last performance that Nikki gives with the dead NPC puppets, no way would one conversation and one performance fix Enio. So this is just very stupid choices from our main cast, but especially Nikki, who has been in previous stories regarding Womency that corrupts people, has been on top of that shit. She has compassion and empathy for people, but she's on top of not letting that Womency harm other people or be a danger to them. And Enio's a danger to himself at this point. So leaving him alone is just endangering him. It's endangering possibly other people. It's just a bad idea. I don't know why this is done. I don't know why they leave him alone. Let him be. Vino is suddenly totally fine with this man who, yes, accidentally was the cause of his sister's death, but still was the cause of his sister's death. And on top of that, has been disgracing the memory of her for years. I don't understand the quick flip of Vino's character, Nikki making a very illogical decision. Again, you can have compassion for someone and still recognize that they're a danger to themselves and others, right? And I feel like this level of complexity, it has been expressed in the Infinity Nikki storytelling previously. And I just don't understand why they couldn't let Enio be a morally gray, complex antagonist. Yes, he's not evil, but that doesn't mean he's done no wrong. And leaning into this morally gray thing, when Nikki performs at the end of the plot in Act 3, and she performs on stage and is surprised, right? She doesn't plan this. So she's surprised when the dead NPC puppets start to sing with her. They come to perform with her. And my question is this the same Womency that Enio was using? They didn't establish that there was a good way, a pure way to animate the soul corpses of the dead, right? I don't think there's a good version of this. And they didn't establish that there was. So Nikki, I have to assume, is using the same Dark Womency that Enio is using. Of course, that's not how visually it's represented. Visually, this is fine. You're supposed to interpret this as a good thing. Them performing with Nikki is supposed to be an emotional payoff. Oh, they're getting one final true performance. But is it a true performance? Because they're still dead. There has been no established Womency that animates dead puppets in a pure way, right? A way that's not corrupted. Now, the plot does not address this. It wants you to just enjoy the show and move on. It does not want you to question how this is happening, which is not good writing. I think if they wanted to have her perform with the dead puppet NPCs, what they should have done, and what's already there in the plot for them to have done, is tie into the main story of the seer's warning that Nikki has to be careful how she uses the Heart of Infinity. Corrupting it is life or death for Mirrorland. Of course, Nikki or the player can assume, well, Nikki would never do something intentionally evil, right? She would never purposefully cause anyone harm. But I think the elevated theme that should have been presented in this quest is that sometimes compassion, right? Empathy can lead us to doing things that aren't right, that are kind of wrong. The intent is from a place of goodness, right? Nikki trying to show Enio, how true art is and how it should have been performed, and why his farce, having his dead friends perform over and over again, why not only is that a disgrace to their memory, but why his friends would have hated it, because art is something that the soul produces. It's something human, deeply human, right? And it goes against the idea of a puppet performing. A puppet can't truly perform, right? Just like how robots or AI cannot truly replicate human emotion in art, right? It has to copy, it has to garble it and chew it up and spit it out as something that is stolen. It's kind of a similar idea. And I think that Nikki using the same whimsy that Enio did to perform this act of compassion, this act of art, on her part, obviously, because the dead puppets still can't perform art. I don't know why it's presented like they are. But this final farewell performance, right, with Nikki helming it as a real performer, I think would have been interesting, showing the players that no, Nikki would never do something truly evil, right, outright. But sometimes it's hard. Nothing is black and white. Performing compassion, using dark whimsy to do an act of love, an act of compassion and sympathy for Enio. Despite what he has done, he did it because he was suffering, right? Her trying to ease his suffering is a good thing. But using the whimsy that is corrupt in order to do this, right? That could be the complexity of it, right? Nothing is black and white. And this gray area is the fine line Nikki is really going to have to walk moving forward when it comes to the Heart of Infinity and how she uses it. Because again, they don't establish that this whimsy can be used in a good way. I mean, I don't think there is a way to present, oh, let's animate the puppets of dead friends. How is there a good way to do that? There's not really, right? So we have to assume it's the same whimsy, and they didn't state otherwise. And I think that this could have been a way more interesting theme to introduce at the end of the story that could have elevated it, right? It ties it into the main story. It ties it into the Heart of Infinity. And it kind of shows you, it also ties into the previous story of the event, right? That Enio was a good man, an accident happened, and it got his family, his friends and family, who he considered family, killed. And he has suffered so greatly because of this. And it's said that, he was given the suitcase because he didn't make it. So we don't know who gave him the suitcase. This is another thing that I wish they kind of would have talked about, or at least maybe given, I don't know, even if they didn't name an NPC, I maybe like where he got it, right? If there was a region he received the suitcase from, or something like that, some hint, right? But nothing. He was given the suitcase, and this allowed him to be able to use the dark whimsy to puppeteer his dead friends. And it's not literally their corpses. It's like, I assume they're like mannequins, like puppets he's made. So it's not like they're actual carcasses, which would have been a very morbid, right? But the concept is still there. I think that Nikki doing what Enio did to try and ease his suffering in a way that was also cathartic for Vino, to be able to see his sister's, the dress, because he was the one who made the 5-star dress that Nikki wears in this season. That I feel like was also not really incorporated. She's wearing the dress, but I feel like it wasn't incorporated the way it should, because there was all the makings of that, because we find a sketch that Vino sent his sister when she was still alive, because they wrote letters to each other, and he's like, he admires his big sister. He looks up to her and he loved her so much and he was so proud of her, and he wanted to do something as all little siblings want to do. They want to be involved in what their big siblings do, and he wanted to make a dress for her, right? A costume for her to perform in, and that's the 5-star dress. And I feel like Vino should have presented this to Nikki, but instead it's more of a surprise to him when she shows up wearing it, which is weird. Because we find the sketch of it, right? So we know it's Vino, but I feel like Vino should have been the one to make it and give it to Nikki as because he knows that she's going to perform, right? It's their joint effort to, I don't know, show Ennio that what you're doing is bad, which he already knows. But whatever. But again, I think the performance at the end with her and his sister's dress performing and her being surprised by the fact that the dead NPC puppets are performing with her, like, ties into the greater theme. Nothing's black and white. You know, an act of compassion can sometimes have you performing something that you didn't intend to do, right? Like, she using the Dark Women Sea isn't something she meant to do, but because of how she was performing, how deeply she felt about Ennio and Vino and their dead family and friends, right? Her resonance with their emotion, I can very much buy that the Heart of Infinity would naturally resonate with the puppets, right? I can see how that would work and how it would animate them using the Dark Women Sea with Nikki not intentionally using the heart. I can absolutely buy that. I don't know. I think I'm repeating myself here, but it's just, I think that there was the makings for a well-presented, morally complex narrative was already there. It was there, and they just chose not to go that way, to take it there. They just wanted to do the black and white thing, this bad, this good. You know, they tried with the Ennio thing, but the heavy-handed dialogue, smashing the players over the head with dialogue about how, oh, Ennio's good, he didn't mean it, it's blah, blah. Like, we know it wasn't on purpose, but it doesn't diminish the complexity of his actions and what it means, the implications of that, right? And I just felt that it was such a wasted opportunity because it was all there. It was all there in the plot and it wasn't touched upon at all. And I think that's what gets me so irritated as someone who studies literature and writing and, you know, critical analysis when it comes to narratives. Like, the fact that it was in the bones of the plot already pisses me off. Because it was right there. It was right there. And they just chose to not. That's why I call it lazy, because they probably were aware of this. Like, it's not hard to identify how this could have played out, how this could have tied into the greater themes of Infinity Nikki, right, as a game. They just didn't want to take the time to go there, right? It's lazy. And again, lazy at the end when Ennio suddenly he's all fixed now after the performance, suddenly realizes I was doing bad, even though he already knew he was doing bad. He was already doing the wrong thing. You know, it should have been about, that final performance should have been about giving him the bravery to face his actions, right? His decisions, face what he's done, the bravery to identify the darkness in him, literally and figuratively, giving him the strength to expel it. And at the end of the quest, he leaves this note for Nikki and, you know, and co. And you find this like little mini puppet version of him in his room next to his like puppet tools. And it's kind of open-ended to interpretation to like what you think happened to him if he died. Whether that's been, you know, he took his own life or he just perished because the magic finally got to him, right? Because it did establish that using this Women's Sea ages you, which is another thing that didn't happen to Nikki, even though I have to assume she used the same Women's Sea he did. She did not age. Cool. Ennio disappears by the end, and you can, as the player, kind of go with your own interpretation of, is he dead or did he just leave and travel by himself and try to rediscover himself in his last days, because he is very old. So I assume he will perish soon, even if he didn't, if he didn't interpret that he took his own life or died due to the magic. So this again felt very cheap after the whole plot has been very lazy, black and white. After this point, up until this point, after the climax and at the end of Act 2, the whole third act is just completely, to me, lazy. And the cutscene was well done, and I understand the emotional beats they were trying to hit, but for me, I was just so distracted by the fact that none of this really made a lot of sense. Like, it didn't make any sense. And so the emotional payoff they wanted me to have wasn't there, even though I was invested in Vino, in Ennio, in these people, the dead performers, in their story, right? I was very invested in the beginning of the quest and very interested and very much willing to care, happy to care about these characters. The way it was handled towards the end was such a disaster to me that I just lost all investment. I'm telling you, I was just so shunted out of my immersion because I was so distracted by the fact that I was like, wait, none of this makes any sense. So Ennio disappearing at the end, I did not care, unfortunately, and I didn't really like how the plot was trying to add depth to itself by being like, oh, did he die or did he leave? Like, girl, I know that, you didn't bother making the rest of this complex, so why are you gonna start now? Why try to opine about the gray morality or the unknown of his, is he dead or whatever? Like, I don't care about this mystery you're trying to generate at the end here, because it's not earned. It's not earned. And if the writing took the time to explore the complexity of Ennio and Nikki, right, her choices in the narrative, aside from I don't think this has anything to do with Nikki's character, just the writing itself was bad when she was making decisions about leaving Ennio alone after literally just being attacked, blah, blah, blah. I don't include that in her characterization. That's just bad writing. But the lack of depth they chose to give time to, right? Because it would have taken more screen time, more writing, more exploration to present these themes, right? Even though it was there, like I said, in the bones of the plot, it would have taken time and I assume money to explore these themes. I don't know if production had anything to do with the way that the quest wrapped up. It felt, again, like lazy and fast and quick. They just wanted to wrap it all up in a bow and not have you ask questions beyond what they present to you. So overall, the beginning was pretty solid. It went downhill, though, from there, unfortunately. And it sucks because, like I said, like a million times already, there was something really interesting in this plot. There was really good ideas, great bones to present a really good moral question, not just to Nikki, right, within the plot and the context of the circumstances of this event narrative, but also the player, right? And for the player to consider what Nikki is capable of. Because that's, again, we're shown what women see is capable of, new things, bad, in this case, that women see is capable of, dark women see, but also what Nikki is capable of doing with that women see, right? Of course, we know she's a good person, so she would never purposefully do anything bad, but this could have been an interesting way to show that, avoiding corruption of the Heart of Infinity is going to be more difficult than just, oh, well, Nikki's a good person, so it'll be fine, right? Again, it had so many opportunities to tie into the main story. It had so many opportunities to elevate Nikki, add depth to her character, add depth to the world, give Ennio a real story and not just like babysit the players and say, oh, this white and black, this good and bad. It really ruined the whole story for me. It really, really did. Okay. So housing plot. Like I said in the strengths, I liked the introduction of new story characters who I assume we will see again because he has a relationship with the seer. So I assume he will pop up again, just like the seer will pop up again. A very cool new character. Great. Love to see that. Unfortunately, we didn't get a lot. And one of the things I have to say that is a critical thing, so this is not a personal opinion, this is a critique, an actual analytical critique. I hate, and this is, Infinity Nikki is not the only game that does this, okay? But I hate when they have a clearly new character or system or place, environment, whatever, okay? A new thing in the story that is introduced. And the main playable character, when they are given the opportunity to ask questions, right? Free reign. Do you have any questions for me? Which is something that he says. I hate when the main character doesn't ask any fucking relevant questions. And listen, I understand that the writers don't want to give away all the answers. I get that. So then don't have this character ask, this new character say, hey, do you have any questions for me? And give no restrictions. Like, you're writing yourself into a corner here. You're writing yourself into a situation where your main character has to appear stupid for not asking very obvious questions about who are you really? Where are you from? Or like, what, any relevant questions about this new person's existence. What's your relationship with the seer? Or how long have you known them? Or, you know, I don't know, there's so many questions she could have asked him that could have been, that Nikki would have asked him, right? And it doesn't have to be hyper specific lore questions because that's meta, right? If you want to stay within Nikki's characterization, okay, Nikki's very smart. She's also very inquisitive. She wants to be ahead of the game. She's been told about this in Heart of Infinity. The seer is also involved, and he has stated he has a relationship with the seer. I'm not talking about romantic shipping. I'm just saying he's known the seer for a very long time, it seems, and helps her and works with her. So Nikki, by default of her characterization, would ask questions about that. Would probe a bit because she is smart. She's been established to be smart. And so when you have her ask stupid, random, non-inconsequential questions because you don't want to give away too much lore, right? Which is fine, but then don't frame the dialogue in a way that's gonna make your character say stupid shit. Again, maybe this is nitpicky, but I love Nikki so much. And I've, for the most part, loved how she's presented how she's characterized, right, in the narrative. She's such a beloved character to me, okay? I'm not saying that's because she's perfect, whatever. I like that she has flaws, okay? And I also like that she just has this bleeding heart, right? That she's very kind, very empathetic, very compassionate. And she's smart and she's kind of witty. She has this like kind of snappy, clever little, humor too. Like, I love her so much, okay? That's why I care so much about this. It's not because I just love hating on stuff or because reading, poorly written stuff makes me happy. It doesn't. It does not. Just because I have a lot to say and I'm very passionate about what I have to say does not mean I derive joy from reading subpar work, okay? I just really love Nikki as a character. I want this game to be good in general, okay? I want it to do well. I want it to be better, okay? But I love Nikki a lot. So seeing her presented in this way just pisses me off. Like, why would she say that? She wouldn't say that. She would ask something true, like something real, and not just, I forget exactly what she says, like verbatim, but she asks him like a stupid question. It's like, of all the questions you could have asked, that's what you're asking him? Is just silly. And Nikki would have not done that. Like, she just would have not said that. So again, if the writers don't want to reveal every piece of lore about this character off the bat, totally understandable. You don't want to give all your cards away, but don't frame the dialogue conversation in a way that forces you to suddenly make your character stupid. Rework the conversation. Right? Or the easiest way to do this is for the guy to be like, I will try my best to answer certain questions, but I can't say everything, right? Have it be like the seer where they're like, I can't tell you everything, right? And then even if Nikki does ask a very pertinent question about his existence or his relationship with the seer or how he knows her so well, because we can assume that, maybe the seer told him about Nikki, but he is in the story, the housing plot, it says that he even though the seer was the one who came up with the idea to gift Nikki this special island for her home, it's him that chooses to take the extra time to make it just perfect for her, to set everything up. And yes, this could also be understood as a meta thing, as the developers talking to the players saying, hey, we just wanted to, you know, they're echoing their thing of, oh, we wanted to work on this. You know, we wanted to make this perfect for you before presenting it to you, blah, blah, blah. So there is the meta interpretation. But if we're just talking about the actual characters in the context of the plot, he's taken the time to put extra special effort into this. And so we have to assume this is because he has some sort of opinion about Nikki, has some sort of knowledge of her or whatever, right? In a relationship with her, maybe she doesn't remember or she doesn't know. Like, we don't know. And he doesn't even have to explain why he can't tell her, right? The player will understand off the bat his connection with the seer and his, you know, being a former god of Mirrorland. The player can easily buy that he can't tell her everything, right? Especially also with the idea about the timelines and stuff like that. Like, the players will be fine if he says that. So then you can have Nikki ask a question Nikki would actually ask, right? And he can just say, I can't tell you, right? Or I can't tell you everything. Ask me something easier, right? And that could give more back and forth between them, get more of an understanding of who he is based off of how he interacts with Nikki. So anyways, again, it's like not that big of a deal. Like, you could call this nitpicking, but I just care so much about Nikki and how she's presented, right? How she's characterized. And it just seems silly that she wouldn't ask him, you know, clever questions about who he is. And he does share a bit, right? He does say that he's a former god. That's a pretty big reveal. Very cool. But we don't know, you know, much past that. So I think Nikki, knowing that information about him, would have definitely had some more advanced questions for him than she actually ended up asking him. So that's my biggest gripe with their interaction. Obviously, I would have loved more information on him and the seer, especially since the conversation happens where the seer, like, her NPC sits in the Sea of Stars. Like, they're having the conversation on the wharf, like, dock. I think in one of the cutscenes or the dialogue sequences, in the background, the seer's just floating there because we're stood right where she is, right where she sits in world. And I think it's silly that she's not part of the conversation at all. I understand them wanting to give this new character his own time, which is good, but I feel like having the seer enter the conversation at one point or something, it could have been good and should have probably happened. Especially since the housing thing was her idea. I have personal interest in seeing him and the seer interact and, like, what their dynamic is like. And again, I'm not talking shipping or tropes, okay? I just want to know about, like, how these two characters interact and, like, what is their dynamic. And maybe I can glean more about, you know, his power level or, like, his purpose. And, you know, he says that the seer kind of saved him, right? She gave him a person to be with, not in that way, but like a home, essentially, somewhere to belong, right? Because where he used to belong is vaguely referenced to no longer exist. So we have to assume he was a former god of Mirrorland, maybe the previous timeline. I mean, I don't know. Maybe we'll get that in the future. I just think it's silly because she was right there. The seer was right there. I think it's just funny that she wasn't part of the conversation at all. I think it also would have been nice. This is a personal thing. This is not necessarily a critique. This is a personal thing. I think it would have been better if he was walking us through our interactions with the little island fairies, is what I call them. I know that's not their actual name. But the island fairies, him walking us through that, and because they keep saying, like, oh, he set this up for you, or he put this for you, or he designed the house for you, but nothing fit. Like, everything is something he has done. He's worked with these little fairies for Nikki, right? To present this to Nikki. So I think he should have just been there instead of them just referencing him over and over and over and over again. If he was there talking with Nikki and the fairies, explaining to her, walking her through everything, I think would have made more sense instead of him just coming to the island and dropping her off and going, okay, bye. You know, again, that's not, it's not necessary, but I think it would have made a little more narrative sense. And also I have bias. I would have liked to spend more time with this character because we barely interact with him. We interact more with the fairies than we do him, which is wild because he's presented as a main story, or I assume a main story character because of his, you know, ties with the seers. So very odd that we didn't spend very much time with him, and that he, despite him being the one who painstakingly and meticulously put together this island to present to us, that he's not part of presenting it to Nikki at all. Like him saying, I put so much, you know, I wanted to put a lot of effort into making sure that this island was a home for you, and I know that you'll do all sorts of wonderful things with it. You know, you'll tailor it to your own whim, literally. But I put a lot of effort into making sure that this is a place that you feel safe and someplace you can return to, right? No matter how hard things get out there in the world. And so it's weird that he's not the one walking her through the initial housing kind of system stuff, or at least introducing her to the different parts of the island, blah, blah, blah. I understand the fairies makes more sense once you get into, like, you know, once the quest starts getting into the nuances of the housing system, right? The buildings and the gardening, blah, blah, blah. That stuff makes sense for the fairies. But like the first main like introduction to crafting and just walking into the house and all that stuff, I feel like he should have been there. Because again, the fairies mention him over and over and over and over again. So odd that he wasn't there for at least the beginning parts of it. I will talk more in depth about the actual mechanics of the housing system in the update, since it's not narrative stuff. It's just like game mechanics, gameplay. I have a lot to say about that. So I'm going to put a pin in that. Okay. I just want to quickly talk about the Stardew Valley collab, because it was technically a quest. I don't know what the extent of the collab was supposed to be, because it didn't really feel like one. If I'm going to be honest, it was a very short quest. For those of you who haven't played it, it was very awkwardly staged. So it just happens all in front of the house. It's the courtyard if you deleted the house, the starter house, but it's in front. It's the main courtyard of the island. And the creature comes out of the like co-op gate, which is fine. Like it talk about how it's a gate that connects to many different universes and places. Fine. That's fine. I can buy that. And then it comes through the gate, and the way it interacts, the fairy essentially is having to translate for it because the creature doesn't talk. And Nikki's interactions with this are very stiff and odd visually, but also what they're actually saying. It's like a bunch of nothing. You can either pick an option, oh, I've seen this thing before, or I haven't, which I guess implies that Stardew Valley exists in Nikki's home world, like the hometown she's from, not Mirrorland, wherever she's from, Stardew Valley exists, which is fine. Like, fine, I'll buy that, right? Like, it's fine. But other than that, like, it's just like random interactions is what it feels. There's no theme to the collab. And you would think, because Stardew Valley is a beloved title that is supposed to provide players with this sense of home, with companionship, right? You make friends with all the other neighboring farmers, right? And that you can even have romance with some of them. Like the interactions you can have to really make your farm feel like a home, to give you that homey feeling that you care about this land, these crops, the people surrounding your home. You know, that's the point of that, right? That's the purpose of the game. And so you would think with a game with a soul like that, and Nvidia Nikki having not exactly the same purpose, but it's supposed to kind of elevate themes of companionship and connection. You want to surround yourself with people that care about you, people who you can rely on. And this introduction of the house, of this Nikki finally having her own home, her own place to come back to return to, a place to feel safe, a place where she can grow her own things and express her creativity. These things, like I said at the very beginning of this video, on paper, perfectly in line. The execution of it was just, there was none of that theme in there. Essentially get the player excited to invest their time into creating and editing the island, right? Engaging with this housing system. The Stardew Valley collab should have been a catapult to launch players headfirst into wanting to make this island feel like home, right? To make it theirs, to make it their own. And it doesn't do that. We get a couple awkward conversations back and forth, and then we get like a couple items in like that were the gift that we're given is like this little music box, which I get, it's cute. And the free outfit we get from the collab is also cute, but this is just given to us as a reward for the quest. It's not something Nikki crafts herself, like within the context of the plot. She's not inspired. We're just like given the outfit. So it's just weird. Like it's weird how empty it is, because the little creature comes in, gives us the stuffs, and then leaves. And I'm not even joking. That's it. That's all that. There's no other further interaction. We never leave the courtyard. It's literally, it's like an interaction that would take 10 minutes in real life is the kind of length we're talking about. Okay. Obviously it didn't take 10 minutes to play. There was no emotional impact. Even, okay, I don't play Stardew Valley, so maybe a Stardew Valley player would feel differently, but I do understand what Stardew Valley is and why people love it and the point of the game, or the purpose of it. And I did not feel any of that emotional theme in the quest. And it's just so weird. Like it's so surprising how quick it was and how it feels more like an afterthought rather than an homage to another game that, according to the Nikki dev team, a lot of people love Stardew Valley in the dev team, and they were very honored to work with them, and that's great. But I just didn't feel that any of that passion came across in this collaboration. It didn't even feel like a collab. They just had a character from the game, and then they got a music box, and that's it. In and out. There was no emotional resonance between the two IPs. And I feel like that's what good collabs do, is that they not only, try to play into the fan service that both sides of, the two fandoms from each game, right? Each collaboration, they're both excited that they're going to interact, but the interaction should initiate some sort of thematic resonance, right? There's a reason for the collab outside of just the content or just the base level fan service that we're going to get. There should be something more than that. And I don't even think the fan service was that good. It was one creature from the Stardew Valley game, and we got a music box. That's it. That is it. That's all the fan service that was given for either side. Maybe their experience, a Stardew Valley player might have more somewhat emotional reaction to this, but I don't even want to call it a collab, because it was literally 5 minutes. Unless I missed something and this is not the only part of the collab, right? Maybe there's more. I don't think so. I think that that was it. And I was just so surprised that was it. I just like, where was it? Where was the collab? Like, what collab? And on paper, this is a great collab to introduce a housing system into Infinity Nikki. So it's good. The concept is good. The intent, I'm sure, was good. What we ended up getting was very underwhelming, and I don't understand what I was supposed to feel while playing this short quest. So that's all I have to say about that. And that's all there really is to say, because there was really nothing to even dissect. All right. Update stuff. I am a person who likes to invest in housing systems, or, my teapot in Genshin. I've spent so much time in there. I'm not going to say that I'm this like tricked out, teapot player, teapot main. I have a lot of time spent in my teapot creating buildings and furnishing stuff, outdoor landscaping. Like, I put so much effort into it, but I'm not like someone has like natural affinity for that stuff. But I do like spending time on a system like that, right? And a gaming mechanic system like your own little house. So I was very excited when I heard that I was getting a housing system in Infinity Nikki. I have to say that as much potential as there is for this system, the gameplay of it is a nightmare to navigate. I still am very confused about a lot of aspects of the system. Like, I still don't have a full understanding of it. And I've spent a good handful of hours, okay, just in the housing system, trying to figure out all of its systems, what what to do when, what the cycle of daily stuff should be with the system, how to at least not maximize, but efficiently begin a kind of like a production line of like what materials I need, what currencies I need, because there's like different, I mean, it's a lot, it's overwhelming, and maybe that's just a me thing, right? But I feel like the way it was presented should have been better. I mean, maybe some people like the more sandbox kind of gameplay where they're just left to their own devices and you can just do whatever you want. Aside from the very, very, very beginning quests where they're telling you this is the crafting table, this is how you craft, blah, blah, blah. They do a little bit of that, but after that, there's nothing. There's no guidance whatsoever. And I remember like scrolling through the menus trying to figure out like what to do, what to make, and I'm too scared to delete my house because once I found out that there's like item limits and you have to upgrade your item limits, there's so many systems you have to upgrade for construction for all these new abilities. And I understand it's a system that they wanted to have people invest in over a long period of time. So I understand they're trying to make things not easily accessible, right? They want people to invest time. I get that. I do. I understand. But some of the time gating stuff is ridiculous. Like, I remember at the very beginning when you're making the like co-op gate, there was just a pointless 13-hour time gate where you couldn't access any further housing systems. You had to wait 13 hours for no reason. You just had to wait 13 hours. You weren't building something. You were just waiting for the gate for co-op. So it wasn't even like you were waiting to build something, right? Where there's a time for how long something takes to craft, right? Which I understand. It's annoying, but I understand. And the fact that you can accelerate building through money, also a little frustrating. Pay to win a little bit, but it's fine. It's a housing, whatever. It's a housing system, fine. It's not like, you know, ability or something. It's just, you know, people can spend money on it if they want, but still a little irritating because it encourages spending when you have long wait times for crafting and stuff. But anyways, I'm getting off point. The gate taking 13 hours was ridiculous and pissed me off because at that point in the quest, you talk to the fairy to unlock a different ability, a different sequence of the housing system. So like construction or whatever, you talk to the fairy to unlock your ability to interact with that skill or part of the housing system. And so the gate happens right at the beginning, essentially, and you just have to wait 13 hours. You can't, if you go talk to the fairy, you cannot move forward to unlock any of the other systems in the house, the island, because you're just waiting 13 hours for this gate. It is unreal. I literally, my jaw dropped when I saw that 13, because I was like, oh, okay, we made the gate, what now? And then I looked at my quest objectives and I saw that I had to wait 13 hours. And I was like, oh, well, I'll just do the other parts of the quest. Like I'll unlock the other stuff while I'm waiting for this, right? I go to the fairy and I cannot proceed with unlocking any new stuff for the housing system until that 13 hours is up. Unreal. For what? Why? For what reason? Again, it was locking me out of engaging further with the system as a whole, right? I wasn't waiting for like a piece of furniture and I could just do other things while that was happening. I literally had only unlocked like planting and that's it. All the construction stuff was locked from, I couldn't do anything. And it's like, if you want players to engage with the game, with this system, why on earth are you putting a 13-hour time gate so early in the system, right? In the cycle of gameplay where you're locking new players in this system, not new players to the game, but to the housing system. You're locking them out of interacting with anything else, essentially, aside from growing and regrowing plants. Like, it's actually wild. It was wild. I could not believe it. I was like, why am I waiting 13 hours? And so I stopped recording because like I had nothing else to do. I couldn't do anything else. Because again, you need, like, there's construction skills, there's gardening skills, and then there's a star collecting skill. There's a whole list of new abilities that you need, and none of them I could interact with aside from like the planting one. I couldn't even really do any construction stuff because my weight limit and all the skills I need from upgrading the construction skill, right? All of that's locked because that was locked behind the gate. The 13-hour gate time limit. It was silly. It was silly. If they wanted to have a random time gate for the co-op, okay, fine. I can understand that, right? Just you're forcing players to take a second to understand the system before interacting with the co-op system. That's fine. But why on earth are you locking players out of the entire housing system for 13 hours? That makes no sense to me. And maybe I misunderstood this. Maybe I could do more. At least in my opinion, what can I do that I would want to keep, right? Any rearranging of furniture, right? Why would I do any of that? Because I wanted to do my own thing. But then once I realized, oh, there's weight limits or object limits. Oh, my construction skill, like you can't place objects in the air, for instance, unless you've upgraded your construction skill to a certain level. So like there's major aspects of what you're capable of doing with the house and the landscaping. You can only do so much without upgrading the skill. And so even if I was time gated for 13 hours, what the heck would I do? Just prance around and rearranging furniture that I didn't want to keep anyway, right? In a house that I'm eventually just going to delete and start over. But anyway, so this was like a huge red flag. And also just, why would you, it's like tripping a toddler. Why the fuck would you do that at the very beginning of the system, right? Of the housing experience. You're just saying, nope, you can't interact with this. You can't level up. You can't unlock basic abilities for this system of gameplay. Nope. You have to wait 13 hours. It was crazy. I couldn't believe it. And it's put a sour taste in my mouth that pissed me off because I was excited. I wanted to explore, and even if I couldn't do everything right away, and I never expected to be able to do everything right away, I expected leveling, I expected new abilities, I expected investment to be required. I felt like I was just locked out of the whole thing until that 13 hours was up. And then after that 13 hours was up, I came back the next day, and once I got all of the, hand holding stuff, which wasn't very much, you're just left to do whatever you want. And a lot of the optimization for, like the cycles of production for your flowers and how to grow your abilities and to understand the experience points you need, because there's experience points for each ability. There's an overall housing experience currency. There's a just regular housing currency, so not experience currency, but just regular housing currency. Like it's a lot of systems, and I know players will get used to it over time. I don't know. I mean, maybe some people didn't mind this, but I felt it was super overwhelming because I didn't know where to start or what to focus on, or like what would even help me get what I needed to get. I didn't even know what I needed. Do I need experience points? Do I need the currency? Do I need both? How do I get these efficiently? Is there a daily thing I can do to slowly get this? Like, I just didn't know. And I actually had to like look up YouTube videos of other players who figured it out. Or on Twitter, there was like threads of people who had figured it out and were trying to help other people because the system, the gameplay system doesn't tell you, it doesn't teach you, what you should prioritize or what you should get. And again, maybe some people liked this kind of sandbox Minecraft approach where you're just like left to do whatever, right? You can engage with whatever you want. And even when you're let out, right, I still do not have all the abilities unlocked. So once you're let out into the quote unquote sandbox experience, you still don't have all the abilities unlocked. You have to discover how to get permits to unlock more abilities. And I had to discover how the freak to do that because I didn't freaking know. I was like, there's no more quests. So where do I do? How do I go? Like, I didn't know what to do. So there's lots of menus, lots of stuff. A big system isn't necessarily bad, right? But it can be overwhelming when there's not enough explanation. And again, maybe it's a personal thing. I just needed a little more hand-holding to understand the full system because it is a lot. And some people did prefer the more sandbox approach. right away. I certainly didn't, because all I wanted to know really was just more establishment on how to get what I needed to upgrade my stuff, right? The whole creating whatever house you want, the object limit, you know, I understand that that's something you're gonna grow as you level up your abilities, level up your whole housing island stuff. Like, I understand you get your permits to unlock different parts of the island to create on, and you need permits for, you know, your own abilities to unlock certain stuff. Like, so I understood that, like, baseline, but how to get that, where to even look to get that was very confusing. So I was not having fun. I was just lost. Without having a whole breakdown of each system, I felt that overall it was kind of a frustrating experience, and it really didn't help. There was that 13-hour time gate where I literally was locked out of exploring the system at all, right? In any of its full capacity right away. Maybe because they didn't want people rushing the system, but if you're gonna put a time gate, like, you already have time gates on the crafting table, right? You already have time gates. There's like a tree that you can get the currency, not the experience points, but the currency that helps you buy furniture sketches and all that kind of stuff. There's already a tree that's like, you have to wait to like get, you know, for the tree to fill up, and then you can like collect all the currency from the tree. So that's time gated. The crafting is time gated. Everything is time gated. So why put a 13-hour limit on the creation of the co-op gate, which many people probably aren't going to prioritize anyway first, right? People are probably going to be focusing on just unlocking all the basic housing abilities, right? Or leveling up their systems. That's what they're going to focus on first, most likely, not co-op. I like that we have a house. There's lots of potential for this, you know, with the landscaping, with the different kinds of furniture we're going to encounter. Taking pictures of the stuff is kind of a fun way to re-engage the player with the world and to go out and like see the front. Like, that's fine. The actual mechanics to build, so how we're able to navigate the building as the player, I feel like isn't as intuitive as it could be. And again, I haven't played around with this as much as other players, and there's so many other great creators out there and people on Twitter, like threads on Twitter, that discuss why they're not intuitive. And I've played The Sims 4, and the building in The Sims 4 allows you a lot of customization in how you want to approach the building. So you can do bird's eye view, you can do like just, you know, full zoomed out, zoom in, you can control if you see certain walls, you can navigate up to certain floors of the house or the estate or whatever it is. The landscaping is much more intuitive. The tools you can use allow you this kind of zoomed out way to build. With Infinity Nikki, you're Nikki building. So you are forced into staying over Nikki's shoulder as you're placing stuff. And that can be really irritating because a lot of the time it's hard to gauge at the point of view of a person, right? It's hard to gauge where I should place this for it to be perfectly symmetrical with this other object. Or like if you're trying to do landscaping and you want to do a courtyard, right? You can't really get a bird's eye view to actually put in a square courtyard in line with maybe your house structure or a pond or whatever, right? You have to eyeball it, or there is ways. You have to upgrade this ability, by the way, to be able to do this, but you can fly up and place these like star platforms that you can build on, Nikki can stand on. And so it allows you more a bird's eye view sort of of what you're making, but we shouldn't have to, we should just be able to go into bird's eye, right? It's very difficult to build in this way. And I feel like it's not super intuitive. It's fine for like placing furniture because furniture is something that you can be right in the room. In person, it's more beneficial to be able to see right there what it's going to look like in the room as a player standing in the room. But for bigger stuff like architecture of the house or any building, right? Or landscape, I feel like you want to be able to zoom out to see where it's being placed, if things are symmetrical, blah, blah, blah. I know there has been like some crazy stuff I've seen online of people making these huge homes already, and that's great, right? That they've managed to make the system work for them, right? They've forced themselves to work with the system in order to create that. That's impressive, but it shouldn't have to be a battle. It should have been something simple and something that, you know, makes sense. And I think that they recently added it, like they're going to be adding a bunch of stuff. I saw a post where they're like, we've heard feedback about the housing system and we're adding like an undo button and blah, blah, blah. They're adding all this stuff. So I haven't read fully through all of that, by the way. So if there are things I'm talking about that are going to be fixed, then great. But as of right now, I feel like I'm scrapping in the mud for some kind of understanding, for a foothold in this system. I have not felt secure in this system. Again, this could partly be personal, but also I just think that it should have been way more intuitive than it was as a whole. Again, lots of potential in this system. I'm gonna have fun, you know, once they work out the kinks and stuff, and once I watch a couple more tutorial videos about how, like, the system itself and having players help me understand like what to prioritize, blah, blah, blah. Once I get a footing and like daily cycles and like what I need to produce and stuff like that, what I need to be working on, blah, 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 I'll have fun building my own home because I do enjoy this kind of gameplay, this kind of system. Would love to hear your guys' thoughts on everything, not just like the housing system. Also, sorry, if you have tips about the housing system, please drop them in the comments because maybe me or other Infinity Nikki players might find them super useful. Even if it's something you think that is maybe obvious, I promise you it's probably not. And if you have a tip, please share it. Like, I'm so serious. Please share it. But I also would love to hear your comments about what you thought of the opera plot, the housing plot, what you thought of the Stardew Valley collab. You know, what are your thoughts on this? I know I had a pretty like a mostly critical, negative experience with this update, which is unfortunate because I was actually really looking forward to this update. And not just the housing system, but the introduction of the stage performance and like the opera plot and like that whole thing. Like, I used to be a professional ballet dancer, so I spent a lot of time performing in theaters like this. And so when they introduced this, that they were going to have like this theater and this, you know, performing arts kind of theme for this season, I was so excited. I mean, I'm not an opera singer at all, but like the classical arts so rarely get attention in mainstream media and content. So I was actually really excited for this plot. And it's just so sad that it ended up failing, at least in my opinion. It failed to be something more. And it failed to have the emotional payoff that it should have had and the tie-in it should have had to the main quest. So overall, pretty disappointed with this season. Not because inherently there were bad ideas. There were so many good ideas, good concepts. I'm sure the intent, the devs' intent was good, right? To even want to have these things be part of the update. But I just felt what we ended up getting, my actual experience, was so different from what I thought I was going to get. I'm just a little upset about that. So again, please share your thoughts. I would love to hear them. I don't like to be negative for the fun of it. Like, I'm not a bitch. I really care about this game despite all of its blips. I just think there's something so lovely about the core of this game, and I just want it to succeed so badly. So I care a lot is what I'm trying to say. And my critique is passionate because I care, right? There's equal care to match the passion of my critique. So I just want to make sure that you understand it's not coming from a place of wanting me just tearing the game up for fun or for clicks. Because if I wanted clicks being oppositional on the internet, I could, but I much prefer engaging with like actual discussion with other players about a game that we all care about and want to do well, want to do better, because there is a lot of potential in the IP. So anyways, without wasting any more of your time, thank you so much if you made it to the end of this video. It means a lot to me that you spend your time watching my content and engaging with my content. I appreciate it very, very much. I do stream on Twitch, and any information about that is going to be found in my Discord. Channel updates are in my Discord too. I know I update my YouTube community posts sometimes, but I am very much more so on our the channel Discord. Again, no pressure if you don't want to join. If you're joined too many Discords already, I understand. I appreciate your view nonetheless. If I don't see you live, then I will see you in the next one.